So this afternoon, we are going to hear from the people who were there. I'm sure you've seen the black and white photographs of our towns and cities between 1939 and 1945. Maybe you've seen newsreels of German air attacks upon our cities and the devastating firestorms and damage to buildings that these bombs caused. But what about the people who were living in those towns and cities? We've got people here today with us who personally witnessed the Blitz on Swansea, the bombing of Cardiff, Newport, Llanelli and Pembroke Dock. People who were evacuated to Wales, who fought fires in London and got to know the American GIs. One even dragged an unexploded Luftwaffe bomb back to their parents' house in Cardiff, which is an actual bomb that we do have on display here. You might not have seen it because I believe it's hidden behind Kirsten over there. And it is pretty massive, so I don't know how they managed to pull it back. Very impressive. But we will be talking a little bit about that further on. So what was life like for these individuals? What of the children taking cover from the German bombs? Well, ladies and gentlemen, shall we find out a bit more about our children of the war? I'm going to be doing a brief introduction to those that have joined us today, and then Neil is going to be leading on the Q&A. So today we have Charles Allen. Charles, where are you? Charles, there we go. Charles was a young boy during World War II. He later joined the Royal Navy in 1949 and served in Korea on HMS Glory. Charles also served on the anti-submarine destroyer HMS Grenville. We have Mike Chappell from Brecon. Mike, can you raise your hand? There we go. Mike was a small child during the war, brought up in a two-up, two-down, typical miner's terrace cottage in Cefn Coed y Cymer, near Merthyr Tydfil, with his parents and his mother's father and mother. His earliest memory of the war was German bombers on their way to Swansea, and after leaving school, Mike attended the RAF College at Cranwell, gaining his pilot wings. We have Mr. Harry Comley with us from Cardigan. Harry, where are you? There we go. Hello, Harry. Harry was a lad living near an operational airfield in Lichford, Staffordshire. And Harry also went on to serve his country in the army, and his service was in Egypt. We also have joining us today Mr. Caredig Evans from Ceredigion. We already heard from Caredig this morning and heard a little bit about him. But his war began in 1939. Hello, Caredig. Caredig was born in London to a Welsh farming family and was evacuated to Wales before having to return to London to dodge the doodlebugs. And Caredig served in the Royal Navy. We have today Don Davis from Ammanford. Don, where are you? Can we give us a wave? Oh, Don isn't here right now. I'll go to the others and I'll come back in case Don comes back. Otherwise, I'll just read it. Gordon Davis from Llanelli. We've got Gordon with us today. We've already saw Gordon this morning when he was awarded his medal. But a little bit about Gordon. He's living in Daven. Gordon also remembers the Swansea bombings. Gordon was aged 18 and also did his national service, becoming a physical training instructor. And during his service, he was sent to a Christmas island where he witnessed a nuclear bomb test. Gordon also worked with Brian in Daven Tin Works. A round of applause to Gordon. We have joining us Mr. John Hubbard and his partner Janet Evans. John, hello. John and Janet are from Aberystwyth, and John was a young boy living in London when war broke out. He was evacuated twice and ended up living with a family in the Rhondda in the South Wales valleys. Janet was living in West London, right next to an operational airfield, and John later also served in the army. We have Mr. Bernard Phillips from Llanelli. Bernard? Over there. Bernard, are you over there? There we go. Bernard's over there. So Bernard was a 6-year-old boy living in Llanelli when World War II broke out. He sat on top of Biggin Hill and witnessed the Swansea Blitz in February 1941. Bernard's Royal Engineer father took part in Dunkirk 1940 and D-Day. Bernard's 2 older brothers also served in World War II, and one in the Royal Navy, the other in the Merchant Navy. Bernard himself served in a Welsh regiment in the Korean War, and after the war, Bernard was a tinplate worker for over 30 years. We have Mr. Dennis Pikes from Fostrassel joining us today. Dennis, whereabouts are you, Dennis? Right at the back. There we go, Dennis. In 1939, Dennis was a young boy living near the Welsh border in Hereford. In the 1950s, he went on to see active service himself, serving with the army in the Korean War. We've got Mr. John Powell from Cardigan. Whereabouts? John's not here today, but I will read out his brief bio for you. So he cannot be with us today, John is the gentleman that we're going to be hearing from, who was the gentleman who dragged the bomb, which is down there. And he was a boy living in Cardiff in 1940. And we are going to see a brief film, I think, from John. Okay, so I'll just tell you the story of how John pulled the bomb with him back to his house, and I believe his parents were extremely surprised to find that it was still active. But it is with us today. We're all safe, don't worry, guys. Safety checks, risk assessment, and all of that. And John also later served with the army in Jordan. We've got Mr. David White from Newport. There we are, David. As a child growing up in Newport, David witnessed a bombing in southeast Wales. He remembers the D-Day build-up and the concentration of troops from the second wave and American GIs stationed in Newport, who got his do errands, including buying fish and chips for them. David later himself served during national service and was attached to the 6th Training Regiment of the Royal Engineers, catering corps based in Norton Barracks in Worcestershire. He subsequently worked in retail and completed 26 years in Newport Council before retirement. Mr. Brian Wilkins from Llanelli. Brian, there we go. As a young boy living in Davern, Llanelli, Brian remembers the bombing of Swansea and hiding under the table, seeing a German plane in the searchlight and a barrage balloon in the sky. In 1953, aged 18, he was called up for national service, serving in the Royal Welsh Fusiliers and was deployed to Malaya. Brian then worked in the Davern Tin Works. We've got Mr. David Williams from Llangwirfon. David was a teenager for much of the war, spending most of these years in Lampeter, Bangor, and even Lancashire. In 1947, he was called up to the Royal Navy to do his national service, training as an anti-aircraft gunner, including spending 6 months on the minesweeper HMS Cardiff. David then worked for the British Sugar Corporation before becoming a secondary school teacher and as a farmer in Llangwirfon, where he still lives today. Now, I'm just going to quickly go back to Don. I don't think he's joined back with us yet, has he? But I am going to read his biog for us, and hopefully John will join us afterwards. So we have Don Davis from Ammerford also joining us today. Don was aged 7, living in Llandybie when World War II broke out, and remembers watching the Llandarcy oil works being bombed and seeing the glows from the fires. He and friends went down into Swansea shortly after the Blitz, collecting shrapnel. He also recalls Italians from the nearby prisoner of war camp visiting his house bearing gifts for the family. He maintained contact with those former prisoners and their families for decades afterwards. Don did his national service with the Welsh Regiment, serving 30 years in the Territorial Army. Don, I believe, is also the proud recipient of a personally signed letter from Sir Winston Churchill, dated 1940, and I'm not sure if Don has it with him today. He does indeed, so if we find Don, head on over to read his wonderful letter. So that is all of the incredible children of the war who are joining us today, and I'm sure we all can lend a hand to understanding exactly what they must have seen at such a young age also. So a huge round of applause to all of you, and thank you for joining us today. Now, this is, again, an interactive session, so I'm going to pass the microphone over to Neil, who's going to be leading on the question and answers. So if you have any questions for our children of war, please put your hands up. Please, let's get some conversation going. I'm going to hand over to Neil now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jess. I'm lucky I've got a bit of a heads up. Now, Stephen, who sat operating the monitor here, him and I have been going around West Wales, meeting veterans, and we've been filming their memoirs. Some of those veterans were veterans like John, who served a little later after the war. And whilst we were talking to John about his experiences, it became apparent that there's an awful lot of interesting stuff that we should record. So that's what we've been doing now. So I've met John, Dennis, and quite a few of the veterans. So I've got a little bit of a heads up, and I know their stories. We did have a short film where we were going to play you, but technical problems, we can't. But we can hear it firsthand. So if I may, there's a lot of service here, and I know that John and Jan didn't know each other. So John and Jan here have been together 25 years. They've recently celebrated that 25 years anniversary. Well done. Well done, Jan. So they were living in London during the war, but they didn't know each other then. And interestingly, there's quite a few other veterans who are in the room today, and older people that were living in London during the war as children, but only recently met when Steve and I started going around filming their stories. So we've been trying to introduce them to each other. So, Jan, I know you've got a hell of a story. Jan was living next to an operational RAF airfield that did come regularly under attack by the Luftwaffe. Jan was a little girl, and your back garden actually backed onto the airfield, am I right? So tell me about that one experience that you explained on film, and you keep getting a memory that's triggered to do with the ceiling, Jan.
The what? Sorry?
To do with the ceiling and what was stuck in the ceiling. Tell me.
As a child, I used to look up and see this shape hole in the ceiling. I can see the shape now. And this top of the bomb that they'd been trying to bomb the airfield, I suppose, came through our ceiling and just missed my grandmother.
Wow. Hang on. Where was Grandad when the bombing was going on?
Oh, my granddad had been run over on the road and killed. So she came to live with us, and she looked after me, actually.
There you go. Stories, family stories from the war. Accidents still happened in the war, lots of them. Who was in the toilet?
My great-great-uncle.
Tell us about that, Jan.
He lived with us as well. And he was sitting on the outdoor toilet, you know, and the bomb went off near, and it blew the door open and blew him off the seat.
You couldn't make it up, could you? Did he survive?
He did, yes. Yeah.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness. What?
He had a girlfriend as well. He had a girlfriend. She worked something with, I don't know what it was, but she had a lot to say. And we used to call her Gertie, the girl with the gob.
A bomb movement instead of a bowel movement. Probably both, I would just say, Brian. Thank you.
I knew then, John was talking one day, he'd been the ACAC guns, and we had one outside our front gate because of the base there, you know, and I can hear that now going, you know, yeah. And I can remember looking out the bedroom window with my grandmother when London was on fire, and the sky, although we were quite a distance from the centre, it was all, the sky was absolutely lit up.
Wow, memories of war.
Doodle bugs, I don't know what they're called, but when they stopped, you knew they were going to come down, didn't you? Yeah. Is it? Yeah. And so we'd look out the window, see it was going by.
Wow, wow. John, and you were in a war, you were evacuated, but before you were evacuated, you experienced the Blitz, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. Well, you never escaped the war, no matter where you were. When I was in South Wales, obviously the Germans were coming over to the docks, bombing, and I used to see Spitfires shooting the Messerschmitts down over on the mountains. I used to wander the mountains, not worrying about it. But the family I lived with were a lovely family. They had 2 sons. The one son must have joined the Air Force fairly early, when he was 17 or 18, and he was killed. And I can see the mother on the day getting a telegram and crying, and I still think about it now. So sad that a young boy like that should be killed so young. You know, it was a very, very sad occasion for me, that.
Sacrifice. Reality was sacrifice, wasn't it? So John, tell me a little bit about your evacuations. When did they happen? Where did you go?
Well, first of all, we were evacuated to the east coast, from London to the east coast, a place called Clacton, if anybody knows it. But unfortunately, the sea mines were coming ashore there, and also, I think, I do know subsequently, the Messerschmitts were coming over, and obviously the government thought it wasn't safe enough for us. So I was then put on the train to the Rhondda Valley in South Wales. So, yeah, we're a lovely family, yeah. And they looked after, well, I was with my brother as well, actually, an older brother. I had lovely memories of the valley, yeah.
He had a Welsh accent when he came back from...
And he came back to Wales?
When I came back to London, they called me Taffy.
So, Jan, how did you come back to Wales then? How did you arrive back in Wales?
Well, my dad was from South Wales, and they called him London Welsh, because they went up to work. And his dad had sent him up there, and he met my mum up there. And they got married, and then my brother had pneumonia and pleurisy or something, and they didn't have any antibiotics then. So they said he should work out in the open. So we ended up on the top of the mountain in Llanweg, Llydogau.
Proper Wales. Harry. Hello. Harry, wake up. So, Jess mentioned that Harry was a young lad during the war, and he lived in Lichfield in the Midlands. Harry, there was a little story you told me about an event that happened that you remember when the aircraft came over the town. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Flying Fortress. Yeah. It tried to land on a private airfield. It didn't, but they were Americans, so they did try. There we are.
What happened? What aircraft was it?
Fortress. Too big for a little airfield, private airfield. But as I say, they tried because they were crippled from the overseas service.
Tell me, did you see any of the Luftwaffe aircraft on the Spitfires?
Birmingham, the Midlands ablaze. When I used to look out of my air raid shelter, which Dad forbid, he wouldn't allow us to look outside the air raid shelter, but the sky was red with fire. And of course there was every now and again you see a German aircraft flying quite low, very brave they were, And sometimes a Spitfire would go over, and minutes later he'd be doing a victory roll. So you thought, oh, he won, he got him. So that's all I ever saw, really. And of course, go in the streets every morning collecting shrapnel. As lads, we used to trade cigarette cards or marbles. But during the war, we traded shrapnel. If you had a piece of shrapnel bigger than anybody else, you were big. But Dad was furious because we were walking the streets during the day collecting shrapnel off the streets. But it did give us a good chance to find horse manure as well. So we had to collect horse manure for the garden.
Normal life carried on then? Normal life carried on?
Oh, yeah. Always in the muck, yeah.
Thank you, Harry. Please do, please do. Here, have the mic though.
Judy did, you know.
I'm going to
It's my brother's name, Gunnar, Noel Benjamin Wilkins, R.A., date of death, 28th of February 1948, age 21, conflict, Palestine. What happened was basically the Israelis had mined the truck, knowing that there was a train full of soldiers coming, and the train blew up, the carriage blew up, but what it was, 26 died that day, and the reason being was under the carriage was wood, old, see? If it had been steel, probably half would have died. So my brother is buried in Haifa, Palestine. Yeah, 21. And in fact, he had a medal here from Elizabeth Silver Medal for outstanding bravery, which means he died for his country. So I think it's next to, I think he got the Victoria Cross. I don't know if this is the second one or the other one, George Cross. But there it is, look. And I was supposed to go to Buckingham Palace to get it, but I was too ill, so I sent it by post.
Thank you, Brian. That's a wonderful tribute. And it's important, Brian, that we acknowledge your brother's sacrifice. And we've done that today.
I was 11-year-old and I came home and the house was full of people crying, you know. I was 11-year-old in Stebbleneath, and when I came home, the house was full of women and crying, and that's what I had in it, 11-year-old. It wasn't very nice, but it broke my mother's heart, it did. Know what I mean? Although she did live to be 79.
Oh, bless her. Well, thank you very much for sharing that, Brian. You heard Jess, I'm going to mention this now because we can't play you the film, but you heard Jess mention about the bomb. Do have a look at it, please, before you go. It's here. Now, this is John. John lives in Llandyssil. He's a former... No, not you, John. He's a former member of Two Para. But I want to tell you this story because it's incredible, because whilst I was going around the country with Steve, we found John living in Llandyssil. He's a bit poorly, so this is why he's not here today. But we sat down with John. Well, I was doing the pre-filming interview with him. I sat down with him and I mentioned about this, that and the other. I said, oh, we've got an event coming up in Myddfai. It's to recognise our 1940s veterans and children who won the war for us. He went, oh, I've got a bomb in the garage. I turned to his wife. He's got a bomb in the garage? Yeah, he's got a bomb in the garage. He says, I got a bomb in the garage. I says, what bomb? Let's have a look. So his wife took me up into the garage. There was a bomb in the garage. It's this one over here, and it's a great big casing. Okay. Oh, is that there? Oh, well, that's not it. That's what it should look like. The fins aren't on this one. So the story is this, right? I'm glad Harry mentioned about collecting shrapnel. That's a theme. That's a theme that we've picked up. A lot of children in the war went out after these bombing raids and they're collecting shrapnel. Well, John and his little mate were living in the suburb of Cardiff, and sure enough, the all clear went, And John and I forget his name, Brian maybe his name was, they went out and they were collecting shrapnel and they wanted bragging rights, okay, at school. And the way he explained it to me was they were building an estate in Cardiff, but they stopped because of the war. And there was like a gap in between these houses. It was all mud. Sticking up out of that gap was a bomb, fins up. And they looked at it, and they went up to it, and they realized what they got. And at that moment, they made a decision, we're having it. That is the best treasure that a boy can ever find. It's a bomb. So they were right. They legged it home, which was 1/4 of a mile away, because they realized they couldn't carry it. Oh, please come on through, Betty. No, oh, please don't, no. So they got home, they grabbed some rope, and they were on their way back. But by the time they'd been back, because when they got home, Mum had words with them and jobs for them to do that kind of thing, so they were delayed going back. When they got back, thank goodness, the Royal Engineers had been, and bomb disposal had made it safe. But they were busy because it was a big, big raid, so they didn't bother taking the casing away. They just took the fuse and the explosive out of it. John and his little mate roped it, dragged it 1/4 mile home. Arriving home, they hadn't told their parents, Mum, we got a bomb. I said, John, what did your parents say? And they were like, what? So anyway, John kept the bomb. So it's with him now. John is in his 90s now, but he's kept it. And whenever he's moved, he's brought it back with him because it's a memento. It's a living link to a bomb, a genuine bomb that was dropped on Cardiff Second World War. And the reason it's not grey, it's silver, is because he explained to me, back in the 70s, aluminium paint became a thing, and his father was painting everything aluminium. So what you see on it is aluminium paint. And he said, oh, you can paint it if you like. I was like, no, you've got to leave it because it's a link to your father. So there you go. That's the story of the bomb. It's real. It's real. It's amazing, isn't it? Incredible. You couldn't make it up. Now, I've come over here to my very good friend, Mr. Dennis Pikes, ladies and gentlemen, a Korean war veteran who served with the King Shropshire Light Infantry on the front lines in Korea. Wow. If you go on to BBC Radio Wales iPlayer, you'll hear Dennis and some of his colleagues. They've just done an excellent half-hour documentary, and Dennis was interviewed, and it's all about our boys in Korea, and it's entitled Our Boys in Korea. It's a brilliant read, and Dennis sounds fabulous on it. Dennis, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot a minute, is that okay? I'm just going to put you on the spot a minute and ask you a question. Is that okay? So in the war, back in 39-45, you were living in Hereford, am I right?
Yeah.
With your father?
Yeah.
Now then, there's a story that you're going to tell us now about this German bomber that came across. Yeah, remember that one? The German bomber came across and was looking for the munitions factory in Rotherwas.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that, please?
Well, this bomber had been, I think it had been hit by a shell from the ground, so it couldn't gain any height. And it flew down the valley, the Wye Valley in Hereford, well, that was it. Like it just got nearer and nearer the ground until in the end it hit the ground, and the pilot got out all right, gave himself up, and went off happily as a prisoner of war.
Now then, we owe that pilot a thank you, really, don't we? A Dankeschön, we owe that pilot, because when he flew over the factory, what was he doing?
Well, he came in apparently over the factory quite low, and the girls were out in, it was changing shift in the factory, and the girls were, new girls coming in and the old girls going off shift. And this pilot flew this plane in low, and he was going like this. And the girls were waving back to him like they thought he was waving to them. Well, he wasn't. He was going, shift out the way, like. And
well, that was it. It just went down until in the end he landed and he was captured, and that was that.
Yeah, another incredible memory of an event that happened in World War II. And as a little boy, Dennis liked fireworks, okay? Fireworks. And there was plenty of fireworks in the war, but there was a particular bonfire night you remember.
Yeah, it was firework night, and I don't know, we knew it was firework night, but we did. And like we were moaning to Dad about not having any fireworks, and we went to bed, I suppose, on a normal time. And then about midnight or sometime in the night, Dad came into the room and he said, "Come on, boys, up you get. I want you to see something." We went to the window, big windows. There was a 3-story house, and all across in front of us we could see these big explosions, like, and it turned out it was bombing at Birmingham. And we stayed up for, I don't know, a couple of hours, I suppose, longer than what we should have done, watching the bombs in Birmingham.
The reality of fireworks night for these children in World War II. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you. Okay. Can I ask someone about the bombing of Swansea? Can someone talk about the bombing of Swansea? Yeah? Tell us a little bit about that, please, Brian.
Well, the only thing you could do basically was go under the table. So I can't remember my age. I must have been about 5 or 6, I think. And I went outside the door and I actually saw a German plane passing over with a searchlight caught on it. And I could see the, another time then, a barrage balloon was loose and us young boys chased it up towards Llangennych. So, you know, but where Swansea had a hammering. Oh, no, the skies were flashing in it, you know. But we weren't at all worried, I don't think. You know what I mean? Same thing, you go in the army, I was out in Malaya, like looking for terrorists, and our job was basically, it sounds horrid, just to shoot them, innit? Carry them back on bamboo poles and stick them in a van, you know. We used to sit on top of them as well. 19, you never thought of it, did you? You know. And it never worried me, things like that. I'd go back again to the army anyway. And I'd go back again to Malaya. I know you talk about a bomb. One of the villagers told the army people that there was a 500-pound unexploded bomb. So we were about 30 men, so we had the job then to go out and look for the bomb and basically blow it up. So one of these villagers, Malayan, took us out. He possibly was rewarded in it. So we had a chap with us and that could detonate the bomb. So anyway, the bomb, oh my God, I think it's the size of this table, and about that thick, I think. You talk more than the size. That's a 500-pound bomb, 500-pound bomb. And anyway, I think it's a Remy bloke or somebody. He fixed the bomb up. So he told us all, listen, oh boys, he said, I'm telling you know, he said, walk away slowly. So once he turned his back, we ran like bloody hell, didn't we?
I bet you did, Brian. I think I would have too. Someone else was pointing out, will tell us a little about Swansea and the bombing of Swansea. Over in the corner, thank you. Bernard, is it? Bernard, thank you.
Yes, I can remember that. We used to go out on top of Beacon Hill and we'd see the sky, it's red all over, you know. But another story was, I lived in this house in Greenfield Villas and we had a huge cellar there. And when the few bombs we had in Llanelli, all the neighbours used to come in the cellar. There was about 20 of us in the cellar, whenever the night, and we spend the nights there, you know. Have hammocks up, sing song, bit of everything. Flask, thermos flask. Good and bad memories, you know. Yeah.
You say sing song, so what kind of songs would you sing together then?
Sosban fach.
Sosban fach. Jessica, you know Sosban fach. You sung it at school as a little girl. Hang on, she's going to do it for us now. Hang on. Gordon? I shall Cymraeg.
Maybe yes.
Oh, there's a microphone there, Dad.
I ti cofio y bom yn cwmpo yn Abertawe? Do you remember the bomb falling in Swansea? You were about 8-year-old, I think.
Yeah.
The roller skate?
No,
Oh,
the
it's
bomb
okay.
in Swansea. When we were bombing Swansea,
Yeah.
do you remember the skies going red?
Yes.
There were.
Is there anything you remember about it, Dad?
Do you remember going under the
That
table
you would-
or something?
Would you like to tell
Well,
everybody?
most families in Derby went because the defence we had in Swansea was on the Gower coast, and it's still there. They had anti-aircraft guns, and also in Derby, and then they had searchlights from Llangennech, where a century bomb was dropped in Llangennech,
Yes, 2.
in the same road where the RN is now. There now, in Levy, stores. Now then, all the other bombs then fell more or less
Furnace.
King, what is now King's Road in Swansea, I believe.
No,
Kingsway,
one
yeah.
bomb fell in the way the steelworks in Pembrey. What the Germans were trying to do was find out the ordnance factory in Pembrey. But apparently, when the bombers come over, Llanelli's in a dip. So by the time that they released their bombs, they've passed Pembrey. It was a munitions factory during the war. So I think one bomb fell in what we call Pontoim. Warm water, you can't say it in English, Pontoim they call it. Well, where the steelworks was in Llanelli. So they were trying to hit Pembrey because the munition factory. And there was also one, my mother was in fact putting gunpowder into shells during the war. That's what their job was. And there was one also in Bridgend where women used to pack the bombs, you know, with TNT. And you know, there was one bloke, Georgie Mills's father, he was ginger, see? So I was to ask my mother, how is he ginger? And that's what it was, packing the TNT powder into the bombs, you turn in orange. So a bus used to pick you up and take you to Bridgend or wherever it was to do the one. My mother used to walk from Darwin to Malva, packing bombs.
When the bombs fell in Swansea, I was then 11 years of age in Stradley School. And of course, from Darwin, where I was born, he looked at a bright glow of fire. And he couldn't mistake it. They were aiming for the trains along the seafront in Swansea from the dock area. And the one I do remember going over to see it the next day was a incendiary bomb that fell on the on the road leading into the RN. That is, of course, and I was in Stradley School when we were told that a German plane had knocked down a Spitfire over the English Channel, but came into Britain and didn't know exactly what the position was, but he did locate Pembrey RF station, and where it landed. And myself and 5 other boys from Stradley School, at the end of the village, we then went down to see the Focke-Wulf 190. I believe that's the number of the plane, and he was prisoner of war then for the rest of the war in Scotland.
Wow, thank you, Gordon.
And that's the bomber, the pilot,
Yeah.
and that is true. And he came back from Scotland after the war to go back to Germany to be with his family. And that's as much as I know. And the aircraft is still Focke-Wulf 190.
Yeah, thank you, Gordon. There's an insight for you. There's an insight for you. The Focke-Wulf 190 was a very, very fast German fighter, and it was feared. It was feared. Okay. So, thank you, Gordon. Diolch yn fawr. He's a lot to say, bless him, and why not? So he should, bless him. He's a survivor, and he served his country. We could go on. You can see that there's a lot of memories here, and it's incredible. We got so many people here that survived the war. So, I don't know, just wow, isn't it? It's just wow. These memories from these people, they were there, they saw it, and let's hope that no one in this country ever has to see what these people sitting at these tables saw. So, once again, thank you.
Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd am rhannu eich cofion. Mae fe, just yn meddwl pob dim I ni. So diolch yn fawr am bod yma heddi. Thank you so much for sharing your memories with us all. Now, next up, I'd like to invite Simon Wright onto the stage, the Chief Executive of Age Cymru Dyfed, who is going to say a few words for us. So, Simon, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. He comes with me everywhere I go. Good afternoon, Pnawn, ladies and gentlemen. As the CEO of Age Cymru Dyfed, I recognise that we couldn't undertake and provide the services that we do without our volunteers who support us, a number of whom are here today and have contributed to bringing our veterans and other dignitaries here. So I would just like to have a round of applause for them, and we will at some later date be marking their contribution to the charity. We now have a presentation, and I would like to ask to come forward Lieutenant Colonel Carter and Idwal Davies. And this will be news to Idwal, who knows nothing of this, so I hope the rest will be very interesting for him and all of us here this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm sorry I wasn't here earlier, but unfortunately I had another engagement. I think we're still having the same conversation over here in the corner as well. Edwell knows nothing about this, and I haven't met him, so I'm going to firstly say, nice to meet you, and he's going to look at me and think, what on earth are you doing here? Yes, you know?
No, I don't know.
You don't know. Well, if you've looked in your biographies, you will see that he's mentioned as his time was ended up in the 7th Hussars. He had an interesting time before he got to my regiment, and I was a Queen's Own Hussars and commanded the regiment in the late 80s. And Erdwell actually was in our predecessor, the 7th Hussars, and he ended up as the butcher there. Now, I'm allowed to tell a little tale because you've heard lots of tales. But when I joined as a young subaltern, I, having been through Sandhurst, having been through all my training, appeared at my regiment thinking, wow, now I'm going to really get down to it and be given a couple of tanks, 3 tanks to look after. But no, I was given the job of being the food member in the officers' mess. And then more important than that, I was given the command of a pig. And I was given this pig, and I was told quite simply, my job was to make sure it got fat, and then I had to deal with the pig. And the pig was to be for Christmas. Now, my job, I thought, my God, how do you kill a pig? Very fortunately, in those days, we did have a regimental butcher. It won't be there now. And we got very friendly with him, and he did the deed for me. So Erdwell would have been doing that job many years beforehand. So I'm delighted with him. And on behalf of the regiment, we wanted to give him a little memory of his day here, but actually a memory of the regiment. He never joined our regimental association, but you will be by the time I leave here today. That's quite simple. But I wanted to give him a book which I co-authored for our 300th anniversary as a memory of his time with the regiment, be it looking after all the food, which was the most important part of everything.
Thank you. Well, I'm shocked this time anyway. I never usually short of words, but this time I am. I don't know where to start, really.
Perhaps a thank you.
But I'd like to go back to the story of the Swansea being bombed, because I wrote in my...
Keep going.
I wrote in... Is it coming?
I'm holding it for you. Yeah, it's coming through.
The night of the Swansea getting bombed, it was 1941 February. I was in town and I could see the explosions happening, and I went up to the top of Beacon Hill to see what was happening. So when I looked over towards the Gower, from Pencloud up to Swansea, there was a line of incendiary bombs. Now at the time, I didn't know why they were dropping incendiary bombs, where they were dropping it. But I read in a history book then why those incendiary bombs were there. It was because when they go on a bombing raid, they send pathfinders. And what happened with that pathfinder, they had dropped the incendiary bombs short of the target. So instead of hitting the intended target, which was the docks, the line finished short, and they dropped the bombs before they got to the docks. So that's why Swansea got blasted. Now, I stood there and watched it, and 3 days later then I went up to Swansea with a couple of my friends, and we cycled down through Cwmwrla, and we looked up at Town Hill, and you could see gaps in the rows of houses, terrace houses up there, where bombs had completely destroyed the houses. So I got down to High Street Station, and I stood by High Street Station, and I watched the, I looked at the town centre completely gone, and the station missed being bombed by 100 yards. That's how near they were to that. I went, in the 3 days, 3 nights that they were bombing, they killed over 500 people in Swansea in 3 days. A little while later then, in Nessie, they were stockpiling oil wagons and petrol wagons down the North Dock where the new buildings are there. Before the war, it used to be where the coal trucks used to be exporting coal from the North Dock. And one night, the German bombers came over and they dropped bombs right in the middle of the 3 lines of trucks. And I was in school at the time, and for 3 nights and 3 days, the fire was blazing and black clouds were going up in the sky and things like that. So not many people know that Snithley had been bombed. But I stood in Swansea and saw the bombs. And I have written a book about the war. It's not available. It's not available.
Well, thank you very much indeed. And lovely to see you here today. We'll catch up in a moment.
But I got many stories about it.
I'm hoping Simon's going to take it back from me. It's going that way.
Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Diolch yn fawr iawn ac llongyfarchiadau to Idwell. Congratulations to Idwell. Now, next up, we are going to hear from Greg Lewis. Greg is a producer at ITV Wales, and his projects include last year's ITV Wales WW2 World War II documentary, Our Greatest Generation, and a BAFTA Cymru award-winning Lest We Forget, filming the stories of the veterans. Greg is going to join us on stage to tell us more about his films and his projects, so please welcome Greg to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak here today. Let's go this way. Okay. Yes, my name's Greg. I mainly work in television, writing and producing documentaries on all sorts of subjects. I've made quite a few history programs over the years, and I've been asked to talk to you today about my experience of doing that and what I felt the interviewee themselves got from it. My interactions with veterans actually started long before I worked in television, and were usually for the written press or for books. I've been lucky to interview people from many walks of life, including veterans from all the major conflicts, going back to and including the First World War. I found that older people are often surprised on my interests, or they certainly used to be. And I remember about 20 years ago going to visit one of the last surviving Welsh veterans of the Spanish Civil War, Bob Peters. Bob was a short man with a self-effacing manner, and although a proud Welshman, he had lived in Kent since about 1940. His accent still had traces of Wales, but it had been a long time since he'd been home. The first time we met, I spent a few hours interviewing him and going through all the documents he'd kept from Spain. At the end of our meeting, I explained that a publisher had expressed an interest in his story. And he gave an embarrassed laugh and said, "I haven't anything to say. Please don't worry about writing the book, but thanks for coming to talk to me." And that's sort of quite typical. I found, certainly 20 years ago, there wasn't that such interest in veterans as I think there is today. And Bob's sort of idea that nobody was interested in his story was something it was quite common to come across. The other thing I remember about seeing him, meeting him, was the way that talking to him about his story was a journey for his family as well. Bob lived with one of his sons, Rodney, who explained during our meeting that the family had grown up knowing very little about Dad's service in Spain. In fact, like most school children, they knew very little about the Spanish Civil War or the British who went to fight there. Rodney enjoyed listening in when I interviewed Bob. "Well, I never knew that," he kept saying. Bob had come home from World War II and settled down to life as a family man, far from the place where he'd grown up. History quietly forgot him. He was a mystery man. I was honoured to have been able to record Bob's previously untold story while there was still time. He died in January 2007, aged 92. I think for a lot of people of any age, having someone show an interest in your life story is quite an unusual occurrence. People normally go along from day to day surviving. Few people stop to ask them how they are, and no one asks them how they became who they are, what they remember, and what they've seen. And I think that gets to the heart of why people normally want to talk. In television terms, what we then hope to do is capture as much of their story, spirit and personality as we can in the short time in the short amount of filming time we have with them. A couple of years ago, I teamed up with Age Cymru, and Hugh in particular, to film with some of the people whose stories were being recorded for their Veterans Project. The programme we made then was called Greatest Generation. Its opening tried to capture the spirit of the stories we were hoping to tell. I don't think you'll be able to hear this, are you? Is it? Oh, I see. Could try it. Let's see if this will work.
Decided to visit some of them to hear their stories. Stories of courage. I think I fear, but oh my God, I'm not just going to ask you when I talk to you already. It's one time to fear. It's like bossing on me. Stories of sadness. Thankful that I managed to come back, but so many didn't. And we never forgot them. Never forgot them. And stories of humour. Oh, yeah. He asked me to go for a walk with him in the woods. And I said, I said, you get into trouble. He said, no, Clark, and he said, I had to consider it.
I think that doing a presentation with a series of clips is the logistics is second only to organising D-Day itself. I think that's the problem. The people who kindly agreed to be filmed in this programme were John and Adelaide Martin, who had both served in the RAF. John as a bomber pilot and Adelaide as a mechanic, ensuring aircraft were airworthy. Both were 100 years old. Adelaide had dementia at the time. I think we got some photographs of them, Steve, I think, if you want to just pass it along there. Adelaide had dementia at the time, but she had some good days, and we were very fortunate to hear her story on one of those days where she could remember an awful lot, particularly from that period. I think she was going through a period of her life where it was rather difficult to remember what had happened that morning, but she could still remember what it was like to be in the RAF during the Second World War. The couple had met at a wartime dance and were married just after the war ended. Sid Dorr was a friend I made in the early stages of lockdown, giving him a few calls a week as he lived alone. These chats certainly meant as much to me as to him. He was a sniper in France, the Netherlands and Germany. Mary Bott, who you saw a little bit of there and you'll see a little bit more of later, she was a land girl with a very, very wicked sense of humour. And Dennis Tidswell, he witnessed not only the Battle of Britain, but the heroic defence of Malta. There's Dennis, actually. You can't see it very well, but he's sitting on a shot-down Italian fighter aircraft, and he still had little bits of this aircraft in his house when I went around to film with him. One of the things I value most about these interviews is capturing the reality of experience. Here are two clips from Sid Dorr and Dennis Tidswell. The first reveals a lucky escape from death and a compassion for the enemy, which both Sid and Dennis showed. And in the second, Dennis describes the aggression that comes in war from a desire to stay alive.
When things get very bad, they get different regiments, patrol platoons or whatever, give them a bit of a rest and take them out, give them a bit of a rest and let somebody else have a go. And we take them back to this place. They got a lovely, big a big trench, two of us, and covered up with little bits of wood and whatever. Was it's nice, you know, let's sleep here tonight. Anyway, they said all the airplanes were going off. And, but they're not really nice there now. The boat, they said, built in the ground and exploding. They explode in the air and the shrapnel comes down. That's it, something. I can't believe it. And the next thing, one exploded, and I heard the loudest bang. It seemed to be the loudest bang in my life. And something hit my helmet, and I said, it's going to knock me down, I don't know what. I thought, oh God, this piece of shrapnel that size was stuck in my helmet. So I hadn't had a helmet on. I'd been gone when I. A little while later, I saw a German who wasn't quite so lucky. Went over the deck, and there's a trench there, and I could see it down as I walked towards it. And I looked in, and there's this sitting there, this young German, what do you mean, he's opposite, like this. And I look at it, and he got his helmet off on his lap, and his sun hat on, with his rubber strap on his head. Then, opposite head. And we just turned him up, if you like. So they came on the War Graves Commission and get on proper burial in, of course. Yes, this chap was, had he done my right, left my helmet on, he'd have been alive today, no doubt. Sad. Yes, there's something, a sad occasion like that happened, but stories to tell, I suppose. Perhaps I said my prayers properly. I think I might have. I think I did. I said quite a few of us. I must say those days. Human nature being what it is, those feelings of sadness, fear. I'm quite sure everyone was fearful. But all of a sudden, that feeling of fear when you're behind that gun and that shot's coming at you with a torpedo loaded, it's one turn to fear. It's that blasted on me. And it turns to aggression. And I suppose that's, it says him or me. And that changes your attitude altogether.
A key part to life is humour. Perhaps humour in adversity more than at any other time. I even once witnessed the famous German sense of humour when I brought Luftwaffe race Rolf Ebhardt over to the UK to meet former bomber pilot John Evans. While standing in the queue at McDonald's, Rolf's choice, Rolf called my name, and as I turned my head, he blew the paper sleeve of a drinking straw into my cheek. "You are the last victim of the Luftwaffe night fighter force," he told me, deadpan. I think that's an honour, I don't know really actually. Here's a little of John and Rolf's meeting, which we filmed in 2012.
Just to prove that German officer was two films talking, we met 65 years ago, and we both trying to kill each other. But how happy it is that that is over in our friends. We had been indoctrinated in the Nazi area, and we didn't know the British, and that's why they were able to force us into the war. I'm happy these times are over, and I think tries to help him and others, makes him realise how fortunate he was to escape with his life. Grateful for the look that I had. No doubt about it. 55,000 crew, who lost dead. It was a huge total. That's well. So anybody who survived that, he was lucky. He was alive.
Sorry about the sound there. I was there when we filmed it and I couldn't hear what we were saying there. But there's a funny little bit in there, if you couldn't hear it, where Rolf is showing his identity card to John from the Second World War. And John looks at it and says, "Oh, you're from Koblenz." And Rolf goes, "Yeah. Have you bombed Koblenz?" And John goes, "No." And Rolf goes, "Good, I am glad." But at the end there, John, the thing that John told everybody always was about the 55,000 members of Bomber Command who died. That was whenever you saw him talking to anybody, he always mentioned that. You know, it was such a big thing to have so many comrades and people doing the same job as him to be lost during the war. John himself was a Halifax pilot who was shot down over Belgium just before D-Day, and he was kept alive, well, he was kept free by members of the Comet Line evasion group, the Resistance, and actually stayed free until the liberation. So he was always, he'd returned there many times to pay tribute to those. They were the people that he saw as heroes, actually, the people who had, men, women, and teenagers, and younger sometimes, who had helped him stay free. Yes, just for a little more humour, I hope we can hear this. Here's Land Girl Mary Bott.
Down on the farm, the land girls are doing their bit and a bit more. I learned to milk cows, and then I had to clean out the stables and places like that, and help out them with the hay. I used to get up at 12 in the morning, and I wouldn't finish till about 6 at night. Was it really fun? Yes, I had fun. And then we had Italian prisoners of war. And the one said to me one day he would like to take, he asked me to go for a walk with him in the woods. And I said, no, I said, you'll get into trouble. He said, not trouble. He said, I had a piece of rubber. As soon as you started that story, I thought, here you go. It was true, though. And they were very clever, the Italians. Look, they made this ring for me out of a shilling. But did he go for the walk? I don't think I ever can't Italian.
That was a very fun day, as you can imagine that. I think that conversation there really captured Mary's spirit. It was very personal and intimate, and we tend to film with very small crews to keep things simple. And I'm always very careful not to be too interested in just battles and numbers and the wider war, because it's nice to learn about social history and the special moments and relationships of people's lives. Here's Sid talking about his late wife.
I'm going to show you this picture of Rita. She was only 19 then, and she was a beauty woman. She always was. But it's 20 years now since she died, next month. So time goes on. But here we are. Never forgotten, of course. she was a lovely wife, lovely mother, lovely grandmother. Nothing more I can really say about her, but just that. She was lovely. That's my little story about Rita. Nothing sad about it, because she's so lovely to remember. And now I'm sad. All my memories are lovely memories, really. And as we spoke earlier, sad little things and things that have happened. But no, they're all lovely memories, lovely things to think about, and all thoughts that I have in life. That's the most important thing. I've got two sons, 3 daughters, 8 grandchildren, and 9 great-grandchildren. And a little sign on my door, inside my kitchen process, I'm the world's greatest hugger. What about the title hard, is it? The world's greatest hugger.
And here's John and Adelaide Martin, talking about what it was like to meet up again after he'd returned from a prison camp.
What did it feel like to be home when you got home? Well, wonderful. Wonderful. But funnily, felt a bit strange. A bit funny, a bit shy sort of thing. Stepping from one thing into another. It did take a bit of getting used to, yes. When we actually met, it was the funniest meeting we've ever had, really, because he come back from the prison camp, and he comes to see his sister in London, and you were there waiting, and there I was. He didn't know what to say, because he didn't know if I really had gone off with somebody else. But then this family all went out, and it was only John and I left, and they were away like lovers. All over again, didn't we? Yes, yeah, yes, yeah.
I think Adelaide was on the verge of giving away too much there, but away like was a big gap before lovers. I thought it was going to be rabbits, you see, when I was there at that time. I believe it's very important to make connections between people, just as we're all doing here today. My family and I were very fortunate to become friends over the last decade of his life with D-Day veteran Ted Owens, who I know many of you will have known. Ted grew up in Pembroke Dock between the wars. He saw the smoke and flame above the town when the Luftwaffe bombed the oil tanks. He experienced the war very up close and personal. Talking to him was as informative as reading a history book. But being with him, you were able to learn things which books and films about the war often miss. For instance, as a commando, he was so used to elaborate training, often using live ammunition, that he couldn't be sure the D-Day landings were 100% for real until people started dying around him. He also told me, as I think somebody mentioned earlier, that the men on the flat-bottomed Landon craft he travelled from Portsmouth to the French coast on were so seasick by the time they crossed the channel, they were quite desperate to get on dry land and take their chances against the machine gun fire and shelling. Ted was wounded by a shell soon after landing and shipped back to Britain. Much of the shrapnel he received in his wound on that day remained in his shoulder until his death this year. Having narrowly escaped D-Day with his life, he went back to France and to war that August. He would be wounded twice more, once by a mine which killed 2 of his friends, and finally while moving with his unit through the Netherlands. By Christmas 1944, his war was over. He was still only 21. He had survived 3 near-fatal wounds and dodged death on countless more occasions. Just 21, with a life still to lead. And this reminds me of a story he told me many times about his time in hospital in Holland. He started a secret romance with a local woman, and each night he would escape out of the window of the hospital ward, shimmy down the drain pipe, and head to her house. One morning, after a night of enjoyment, he clambered back in through the hospital window and back into bed just seconds before the head doctor came into the ward on his rounds. The doctor took his pulse, felt his forehead, and said to the nurse, "This poor young boy is still exhausted from his wartime endeavours. He'll need at least another week of our care." That young lady in the Netherlands was not the only one who fell to Ted's charm. We all did, all of us who knew him. He was witty, kind, a marvellous storyteller with a fantastic turn of phrase. Having been silent about his war experience until his 70s and 80s, a common story, I'm sure some people here will be familiar with that. It was in his last decade of his life that he wanted everybody to know, to put it on record. He was particularly interested in telling his story to children and young people. My children were lucky to form a friendship with him, which we were able to capture in a 3-part documentary where we accompanied Ted to France, the Netherlands, and Germany. Here's how the story began.
This is Ted Owens. He fought and almost died in 3 major battles of the Second World War.
Nobody can imagine it.
Including the D-Day landings.
You have to be here to really understand it.
He is 95 years old. He is living history and he is our friend.
75 years ago, that's a long time, and I'm only 8.
It is a long, long time. But when you get my age, you look back, it's not a long time. Time goes very, very quick.
This is the story of an unforgettable journey, tracing Ted's wartime experience as an elite commander.
Okay.
And bringing generations together.
I'm just glad that Ted's alive and we're here and we know him.
Do you ever worry about wars in the future?
Oh yes, everybody do.
Some of these people didn't even make it to double figures.
No.
There'll be plenty of joy. Those over 200 photos back there. Over 200 added on. This is it.
And some sadness too.
It's from Ted. He wants to remember you. I'm Evan and I'm 10. Do you think we'll come back, Ted?
I hope so.
I'm Kiva and I'm 8. We want to understand history so we can help make a better future.
It's not a very nice thing to talk about. We have to do it. Either they shot us or we shot them. And a lot of people have suffered for you because you are the future.
This is a journey we'll never forget.
All these journeys and days like this are not to forget. These stories tell us something from the past, but they also raise questions for us now about the nature of courage, about questions of war and peace, of friendship, and of conflict between people and nations, and about how we live our lives. Sadly, many of the people we've met here today are gone now. Bob, the Spanish Civil War veteran who I spoke about at the outset, John, Evans, the airman, and Rolf, the Luftwaffe pilot, Dennis, Mary, Adelaide, and Ted. Gone, but not forgotten. Never forgotten as long as those of us who knew them are around to tell their story and speak their name. Our final moments on the journey with Ted, for me, summed up why we connect, why we listen to other stories.
Do you think we'll come back, Ted?
I hope so. I'll keep 2 fingers crossed. I hope sometime I will come back. we can only try. You never know what's the next corner. Yeah.
We've been a long way through Normandy, Holland and Germany.
Oh yes, we have. And I've enjoyed every minute of it. And thanks to you and your brother, I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. Thank you.
And thank you, Ted, for our journey of a lifetime. As the years pass by, we'll always be able to say we knew a veteran. We laughed with him and we learned from him. His name is Ted and we'll never forget him.
I've enjoyed my life, and I'm hoping I can enjoy it more. I'm not being greedy, but I've had a wonderful life. I've had a few sorrows, but very few. Only when I lost my dear wife, that's my biggest sorrow. But otherwise, that's been a fantastic life.
By the time we reach Ted's age, it will be a new century. D-Day will seem like ancient history. I wonder how the world will change in the next 75 years.
I wonder. I hope for the better.
Passing on stories for me gets to the very heart of what we are as human beings. It's how we learn information and facts, but perhaps more importantly, it's how we learn compassion and empathy. I want to thank you for your time today and for listening to a little of my story and of my friendships and special moments with some very special people. Thank you very much.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Can we just pop the lights back up, please? There we go. I think we were all getting a little sleepy with the lights out. I saw a few eyes closed. I'm just saying. But it's been a long day, but it's been a lovely day to hear from so many people, so many guests here today with us. So thank you very much to you all for joining us. There we go. Get a bit of daylight in. So we are coming to the end of our day, and to close our event today, I'd like to invite Peter Hamilton, the chair of Age Cymru Dyfed, to say a few words.
Good to get a round of applause before you even start, so I'll take that, thank you. Well, good afternoon, heroes and carers, ladies and gentlemen, and colleagues from Age Cymru Dyfed. Before I came here, I thought what I'd do is write a small speech. But having been here today, and heard and learnt what I've heard and learnt, it pales into insignificance, ladies and gentlemen. I'll tell you, if I may, a very quick story. As you can see, I'm much too young to have served in the Second World War. But I did see active service in the Royal Air Force. One of the last conflicts, but not the last, in Borneo. But one of my postings was to the Officers and Aircrew Selection Centre at RAF Biggin Hill. And I wondered earlier when we heard the stories about the garden backing onto the airfield whether it was Biggin Hill, because it's surrounded by, or was surrounded by houses. The little story goes like this. As orderly officer on a winter's night, I'd heard this story many times about a Nissen hut that was on the airfield that was really the only thing that was left from the Second World War. Much of it having been bombed, and there were probably one other billet block. When that evening I decided to put this story to the test, and the story was that during the war, during many German bombing raids on RAF Biggin Hill, that 2 pilots who were ready, as many were and still are, to fight and save our country, were in this billet, this Nissen hut with a metal roof. And the story was that during this raid, they ran out to their aircraft at the moment a bomb dropped close by. What happened to them was that they were impaled against this brick wall, arms stretched out, both of them like a cross. I never really believed that story. But on that night, walking round in November, I thought, I'll go and have a look. And many had before me. And I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I saw those 2 crosses on that brick wall. Not bright, just like effervescent outlines. 2 crosses. And it touched me. And it reminded me, as today has, the debt we owe to the men and women serving and civilians during the war who enabled us to be here today. There's a number of things I'm going to take away from today because, as I said earlier, what I was going to say is not important. Some of the things I heard from veterans today has really touched me big time. Here's a few of the things, and they're perhaps not verbatim, but you will have heard the same as me, and these will remain with me for a long time. One gentleman said, I did not know if I'd be here tomorrow or even tonight. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that? It was my duty and my pleasure to serve my country and fellow men. Another said, we just got on with it. It was our job. Another gentleman from over here said, I wish we still had the camaraderie, and perhaps we could call that love in many cases, and respect that we had in the war. I wish we could have it today. From butcher to tanker to butcher again. Fabulous story. Another gentleman said, it was horrible. You just can't explain what we saw. Another said, bodies just floating by, perhaps never to be seen again. These stories, ladies and gentlemen, are repeated throughout Great Britain and Ireland, and perhaps, dare say, many places round the world. But it's a privilege to have been here today, and it's something that I feel proud, or as chair of the organization, to have had you know, a role to play in this. Another thing that struck me today, when the heroes were being interviewed, was you could hear a pin drop. In this room, you could hear a pin drop. The opposite of that was the buzz in the intervals and when there was small breaks was palpable. You could feel it. I wish Manchester United could bottle it and use it now. They need it badly. So in closing, I'd like to thank my colleagues, the Myddfai Community Hall Committee, and everybody else who's made time to be here today. It's been our privilege to be with you today. And as somebody mentioned earlier, why haven't we done this before? I would say, why don't we do it again? Because we are sadly, as we've just heard from that fabulous documentary series, these folks are not going to be around forever. Let's capture as much as we can. Let's put arms around our heroes so that they are here with us for much longer and they know how much we love them. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Peter. Diolch yn fawr iawn. And ladies and gentlemen, that does draw our event today almost to a close. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our inspiring and incredible guests, our World War II veterans, ladies and gentlemen.